to Dead Time with your host, Holly Faust. Hey everyone, and welcome to Dead Time Tales. We're back in for season 2. Tonight, we're starting our season off great with a demonologist, author, paranormal investigator, James Annitto, and I'm hoping I pronounced that right. His career spans nearly 2 decades. So let's bring James in. Hey, James, how are you?
Hello, Holly, and you did get my name right. I'm
Yes.
very impressed.
Hey, I live in an area that's prominently Polish.
Okay.
So, pronouncing names is very important. So,
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Those are some very difficult and long names. The
yeah.
Italian names can get difficult too, but Polish, oh gosh.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. I have a kid that played football with my son. His last name was Petkevich. Does not sound anything like it sounds. We watched him on the local news one night, and
yeah.
they're calling him Pickowitz. So, so for the longest time, that was his nickname. But I am so excited to have you. I know I've been trying to get you on now for a little bit, and what a better way to kick off my season 2 of my show. I'm pretty excited because we come from similar yet pretty different backgrounds
Yeah.
in the way we practice. And I know you're also like me, you kind of got your hand in a little bit of everything.
I love all
um
the cookie jars for sure.
yeah, yeah, me too. I'm actually my newest nickname is actually the Cryptid Princess.
Oh, nice.
So but yeah, so I know you have a couple of books coming out. So I'd like if you could share just a little bit. You don't have to tell us everything. We want people to come out and buy them, but
Yes, of course. Yes, I have two books coming out. One's coming out end of October on Halloween. I actually didn't realize when I picked that release date that it was Halloween. For some reason, it escaped me. It actually goes on pre-order on the 17th. I'm hoping as long as I can get all my ducks in a row. But the first one is this is the proof. It's the psychological dimensions of the paranormal. And that one is basically viewing the paranormal through a different lens. I have a psychology major. I am a bachelor's in psychology, currently working on my master's. So I think the psychology aspect of it is very fascinating. You know how you have parapsychology, which looks at the paranormal through a paranormal lens, and then you have anomalistic psychology, looks at the paranormal through a natural lens. And I find it very fascinating, and I think it applies in many forms of fashion in the world of demonology and in the world of paranormal in general. So that book is a different lens. Not everything in the book is something I necessarily agree on, but it is what's out there for science and social science. And what I like to say, and I say it throughout the book, is it walks a fine line between skepticism and belief. It doesn't pick one or the other. It gives both narrow points, but it stays right in the middle, saying, "Hey, this could be what it is, or this is why it's the belief of it." And then my second book, sometime early 2026, well, maybe mid 2026. I haven't figured it out yet, but it is the book History of Demonology. And there are a couple books out there on that topic. You have the Dictionary of Demonology by Michel Belanger,
Mhm.
but and then you also have the one that was done by Rosemary Ellen Guiley, the Encyclopedia, and then you have two other not so very well known people in the paranormal field. They're more of like the deliverance ministry people, but there's two history of demonology books as well. But of those books that I've read, and I've read hundreds of them, my book's a little bit different. It's has anthropological viewpoint, it has psychological viewpoints, it has historical viewpoints, even paranormal viewpoints, and it goes through from like Mesopotamian times to modern times with of course video games, entertainment such as movies and TV shows. So it really just hits really emphatic points of every era that was important in the evolution of demonology. So yeah, those are my two books coming out, and I'm very excited. I've been saying that I was going to write a book for years and years and years and years, and people begging me to do so. And I just had a recent break for about 7 8 months where I just disappeared, left social media, left the paranormal, and during my class studies, I put pen to paper, more so fingers to keyboard nowadays, but and just got done with it. Like my first book coming out is 99.9% done. It's in the editing phase right now. I have a few things that I am changing, that I have read the proof, so I want to make some edits. And and then once that comes out, I'll finally have a book. It's definitely a lot different than what people probably expected
Oh,
to be, but I needed to do it because psychology is probably an equal love of mine, on the scale when it comes to paranormal or demonology.
and I think it's important, like, with investigators. I mean, I always, when I had been with previous teams, we always worked closely with psychologists.
Yeah,
I know if we had very difficult cases, or even like right in the beginning of my career with the former team I was with, we had to go through rigorous psychological testing, and
yeah,
it was actually how I learned that a lot of my problems weren't related to mental illness, but more my psychic abilities,
yeah.
because I got a psychologist finally who understood, like, when I'm saying I hear voices, it's not in a
Schizophrenia. Yeah,
yeah, it's because
yeah,
I was diagnosed years ago as a paranoid schizophrenic.
yeah,
And I knew I wasn't, because every medication they ever put me on never worked. I still heard the voices, and I still, like, was paranoid all the time. And now I take anxiety pills, and
yeah.
that stopped the paranoia, but the voices will always be there. And I think not enough, especially in modern investigating, not enough people are paying attention to the old true ways, the psychology, the parapsychology. People, like, I've seen it, and it was a theme that I've seen over and over and
Yeah.
over today, especially. It was like, wow, this theme is really hitting home today.
Mhm.
Everybody's saying about everybody wants that quick fame, that
Yeah,
YouTube fame, and the screaming and the yelling, and they're not out there doing. Like, I started over 30 years ago. I was
yeah.
18 years old, and I mean, I remember having a recorder and a flashlight, maybe a camera, and our recorders were huge. They weren't these
It
tiny little voice recorders.
it was the analog ones, tape
Right, and
recorders, yeah,
and it had
yeah,
a regular cassette tape in it.
yep,
And, our video cameras were huge, and they had
yep,
VHS tapes in them. And, but I remember we very much, like, were scientific in the way we did things.
yeah.
And I've gone and, like, for the first time in my life, I have tech. I never was a tech person,
Yeah,
but like you, I took time off. I walked away from a lot of things. I needed to breathe. And like you said with the book, I can totally understand that. It took me, the book that I released last year on special psychic kids with special needs, took me like 10, 12 years to write it.
yeah,
And it's not even thick. It might be like 110 pages,
yeah,
but because it was personal to me.
yep,
I wanted it to be so I can understand that. Like, I was very lucky that, it took me 10 years to write that one, but in the same amount of time, I've written 3 other ones.
yeah.
But they were different types of books. They weren't personal stories. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think once you get the motivation, like the second one went well, the second one's structured differently too, but
mhm,
yeah, I think once you write the first ones and you get over that hurdle, then you just know you can do it, right? I think there's a lot of hesitation because, like, I'm assuming, like, myself, you're a perfectionist, and
yes.
you want to put something out that is legitimate, literate, and so the same thing is like, it's like, now I got over this hurdle. Now I have belief in myself. Now I can write it, right? And I'm assuming
And
that's what.
wait till you reread it,
Yeah,
because I go back and read my first book, and I see the spelling errors that weren't caught.
yeah,
And I'm like, "I need to re-release this in a second edition because this is awful." And
yeah,
everybody's like, "No, you don't. It's fine the way it is."
yeah,
Errors are in all books, and not every error is found. But and I know you're kind of like in the same realm as I am when it comes to like working with demonology. I'm
mhm,
ordained in the independent Catholic Church.
yep,
Um, and it's a little different than the Roman Catholic Church, because we actually do have a level before we become a priest where we're called an exorcist and a healer together.
mhm,
And we actually have to learn that demonology aspect before we even, and I'm sure priests do too, because my local priest, for our diocese, is the parish demonologist.
yep,
And him and I have had so many conversations together. Like, he actually studied this in seminary. And so he did study it, but they don't have that level
Yeah.
within at least the Roman. And I don't know how a lot of other Catholic churches work, because now I do a lot more, not even Catholic, but just Christian churches, because I'm more interfaith now.
Yeah.
So I studied, Islam, and I studied Buddhism. I've studied all of it to get that kind of. So I always find that interesting how we kind of overlap in that sense, but yet we're different.
Yeah, I'm eclectic too. Like I said, my demonology book coming out is based on multiple different religions, belief systems. Like I believe that most people don't even know what the first human religion was, which is animism. But I have a full fledged love of learning all different cultures, all their identities, their belief systems. So I'm the same way. I'm very eclectic. I when I found my religion, which was in my adulthood, because growing up, I like to say I was a Darwinist, so I was a big evolutionary biology guy, and still am a biology guy. Like I think chronobiology has a lot to do with with our circadian rhythm, has what how we have experiences, and a pineal gland and stuff like that, which was once known as the third eye, or still is technically, but what we know it's not a dead gland since the 1950s. So I'm very eclectic as well, but it like in my journey in Christianity is that I actually, when I found my religion, which was in the military, when I got out, I helped at a local Church of Christ. I was actually a Church of Christ member,
Okay.
and through dedication and through time, I became a pastoral assistant, and then kind of outside of the community or the congregation, I was a deliverance minister, which was approved by my pastor to do deliverance work. And then I much later on in life, I kind of had an anti-Catholicism viewpoint, but that I was blinded.
I think a lot of people go through that though.
Yeah, I was blinded in my historical fact, right? It is the oldest church. It's to be honest, but in a Christian sense. But I later converted to Catholicism and actually joined an old Catholic church movement, and then later became a deacon, which I don't revert to that role anymore. I'm no longer connected to the old Catholic Church. I do go to church, to a Roman Catholic. When I do, I haven't in a while, but usually I would go to a Roman Catholic church now. Sometimes, most of the times, it's with Father Bob actually. But yeah, no, I would say that I've gone through the phases. I have sought out different branches. Most people don't know there's like 42,500
Yeah.
different denominations of Christianity, and then there's also 4,500 different religions out there. So there's a
Mhm.
lot. There's a lot to study and a lot to take in. And I like to say that I'm a person that likes to go down a rabbit hole and keep digging. And then if I get to the center of the earth, I keep digging to the other side.
Yeah.
That's just how I am. I love history, like we were talking about before we
Yeah.
went on the air, and I just love the similarities but differences between all belief systems.
And when you had mentioned Michelle, she mentored me a lot in my early
Hmm.
career. And there was one thing that she told me, and I still carry through. It was like she said, faith is like a diamond, and all of the different facets come together to
Yeah,
make that stone, and that's how we all work together to make something beautiful.
yeah,
And I stuck with that, and that's what really led me down my trail. And I think that's the way I view my investigating.
yeah,
Um, I'm like you. I love to go to historical places, don't get me wrong, but my heart and soul is working with families.
yeah. Me too. Yeah,
It's where I got my beginning, because for me, my journey into the paranormal was to find answers from my friend who had committed suicide. I needed to find answers because I was told he couldn't go to heaven,
yeah,
and I wanted to prove them wrong. Is he there? I don't know. I mean, as a psychic, I've had, glimpses of him, and I've talked to him, and I've seen him, but I don't think I've ever gotten down and actually said to him like, "Hey, where are you?"
yeah.
Because he seems happy wherever he is.
That's
So to
that
me,
is
I'm assuming that's his version of heaven. Like, I
yeah,
like it like supernatural.
yeah,
That's how I tell people, like, all the time, maybe it's like supernatural. Everybody has their own version of heaven,
yeah,
and I like my youngest child, they are that way. They view things through a very eclectic mindset. And they say the same thing. They think we all go to our own perceptions, and that's what started my career in the
Yeah.
paranormal. And like you, I went through the gamut. I was Wesleyan. For I was raised Roman Catholic, but I actually, when I met my husband, became Wesleyan. And I was a Sunday school teacher, and I did all that. I couldn't join the church though because I smoked. So, but I could teach Sunday school and vacation Bible school. So, and that was the gamut. Like, my kids will literally sit back and they tell people, like, my our mom had us at so many different churches because whenever they would start preaching something negative about another faith,
Hmm.
we would leave.
Yeah.
And that, because I was Muslim, my ex was from Iran, and I wore a hijab and all. So I've gone the gamut. But like, as an investigator, I was very much one of those everything is paranormal when I began. So I like that your book is like right in the middle, because now I'm at a point where I have healthy skepticism.
Yep.
I want to be proven wrong.
Yep.
I'm skeptical about it. So prove to me that this is actually happening.
No, I agree too. I think one of the things that I laugh at is, skeptics are great and believers are great, but I think if you lean too heavily one direction, that you're still doing something wrong, right? You have
Mhm.
to have a healthy balance, right? To me, I'm a very big person of analytical thinking and critical thinking. I work in construction, work in old homes. I implement a lot of that into my investigating of people's homes when they're dealing with things. So it's important to be in the middle and observe. Like, it's great to have your opinion of something or your bias, right? But at the end of the day, especially when you're dealing with families, you want to view it through multiple different lenses, how they maybe view it, or maybe how their culture views it, or their belief views it, and maybe how you look at it, and then add all these little elements that really, at the end of the day, will hopefully help them overcome that hurdle. Because we both know it's not easy as snapping your fingers and waving your fingers, and sometimes you have to coach them to find their free will again, and willpower through it. Because I can do a blessing, but they can go right back to revert back to what they
Yep.
were doing before, and it comes back. So that's a psychological thing, right? You have to help them overcome their psychological hurdle and regain their faith, regain their power to keep living positively. But yeah, so it all intermingles, and I think if you're too skeptical, I think that you're doing too bad. Like, I know people that are part of CSI, the Skeptical Inquirer, and most of them are great guys. I'm a big Joe Nickel guy. I think he's so smart, but there's a lot of things I don't agree with him on either. Same thing with like a Kenny Biddle. I've investigated with Kenny Biddle. I invited him on um, um, an investigation before because I like to see his viewpoint of it, even though I might not necessarily agree with all of it. But I also have brought on like heavy believers and like to me that are very subjective. Like they believe everything's the paranormal, and I observe them too.
That
I
was
like.
me.
Well, you know what? See, like you talked about like kind of your entryway. My entryway is different. Like, why I love psychology so much, but I also was so anti-religious as a child, is because at 3.5 years old, I was abandoned by my father on the side of the road, right? And then I was adopted. So, and the people that adopted me uh, were Lutheran, and we'd go to church every Sunday, Bible study, and all that stuff. And I started when I was starting to be able to be cognitive myself and understand my thoughts and understand the surroundings. I question, why would God do this to me, and really turned me off to a higher power. And that's when I really started diving into, at such a young age, going to the library about religions of all different cultures, evolutionary biology, such as Charles Darwin, but and it just became a love of mine. And really, funny enough, is that's what segued me into the paranormal. Before I went in the military at 14, 15 years old, same with you. We started off with like disposable cameras,
Yep.
flashlights, and we go meet a bunch of buddies that were interested in being spooked, possibly. Would go to like local cemeteries. We'd break into places. not being
Well,
like
we were kids, we were dumb. We didn't know
yeah.
better.
Yeah, and we wouldn't do anything lethargic in the sense of like
No,
defacing things.
just sit there.
We'd go in there and go into places and try to be spooked, and that's really what enamored me. But really, what my launching point was is to figure out if God was real or not. Or and then that became the paranormal bubble because you have talk about dimensions, you talk about angels and demons,
Right.
which are non corporeal beings. So all that stuff kind of unraveled, and like it was like a fruit loop that unraveled, and like, oh, I got to eat all this, and then it just I ate it up. But in the military is when I found my faith, and I really had a moment that changed my life. I felt this like sudden jolt of energy. I tell this story a lot, but I used to go to every Sunday to stop cleaning the barracks for a couple hours. I'd go to church service, and I'd change them every time. I'd go to temple, I'd go to gospel, I'd go Baptist. I would change it, but then I went to the Church of Christ one. I did my old thing in the pews of trying to get a couple shut eye before I got yelled at by a drill sergeant or nudged. But and then I felt this sudden urge and this light over me, and before I knew what my body was responding to, I raised my hand and I got baptized that day. And it was a complete 180 to what I was before that moment. I started reading the Bible, I started praying, and not much later after that, I would say like 6 months after I was done with basic and IIT and before deployment, I actually got medically discharged from military service. And I am a suicide survivor of as a kid because I had so much
Mhm.
trauma and grief of what had happened to me, and even the people that adopted me, as much as I appreciate them taking me in, I like to tell people like, if you've ever watched the movie Mommy Dearest, that was my
Yeah.
childhood growing up, and so it was like, I had a lot of disdain in life, and that's why I could try to commit suicide. But when I got kicked out of the military, I felt like a complete failure because medically wise, I didn't do anything bad, but I felt like a complete failure. And I don't think if I didn't find my faith in that prior, I think I might not be here today because I would have been in a dark place and probably would have done something
Oh,
stupid.
I can only imagine.
But I found my faith. And you know what the funny thing is when I got into the paranormal really big, and that's when I started working with people like Carl Johnson, who was their tech
Mhm.
manager for Beyond the Veil Paranormal. And that's really the pathway and the pastoral ministry, working with the Church of Christ. And all that stuff segued into me then getting into demonology full fledged and doing the work. So I think that, having that pinnacle moment, I think that God showed me something, protected me and set me up for spiritual warfare and being involved in this work. And because I could have been anything I want in my life. I do have a great job, puts a roof over my head, feeds my kids, gives me nice things if I want it. But at the end of the day, it's like I could have chose anything else but demonology.
I think
And
it chose us.
yeah, I
That was
definitely.
something,
Yeah.
when I had met Lorraine,
Yeah.
um, that was something I remember her always telling me.
Yeah.
This field chooses us, and no matter how much we try to get away from it, it
Yeah.
remembers us and
Yep.
it's going to pull us right back in. And that was something that stuck in my head
Yep.
because, like, for me, like, you guys had to go break into buildings.
Yeah.
I grew up in a house that was built in the late 1800s that was the meeting hall for the KKK.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I mean, the stage and everything was still in the attic. So we had glory days at that
Oh
house.
yeah.
We had everything going on. My dad, who was, he was literally born on a boat on the way here from Ireland.
Okay.
His family were like staunch Irish Catholics, and he couldn't even sleep on the one side of the bed because he would see them coming out of the attic at him. And there was always something because there was a suicide in that house. There was
Yeah.
always something that was going on. And then I was also the baby of the family, so my brother and sister had 10, 12 years on me. So they would freak me out with horror movies. Like, I'm still to this day, I can Dave Schrader, when we were at the bash, literally saw me drop on the floor and roll under a table to get away from Michael Myers.
Oh
But
gosh.
yet 2 minutes later, he came over to my table, and there I have a Ouija board. And he's like, "So that doesn't scare you, but that does." And I'm like, Well, because of the eclectic base of my belief system and
Yeah.
the research that I've done, like, that doesn't scare me because I know what that does. Where that I've watched him kill people on my TV,
Yeah.
because I was, such a of an age where I couldn't disseminate between fantasy and reality.
That's true.
None of
Yeah.
the other horror movies scare me,
Yeah.
except after Poltergeist, I had a hard time eating rice again for a long time.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I sit back and watch Amityville, and I laugh at it, the
Yep.
movie.
Yep.
I laughed at The Exorcist, but that movie in
Classics.
particular, yeah, the
Yeah.
classics, I laugh at
Yeah.
them because it's just like, well, even if I watch Insidious,
I love Insidious.
I
My favorite.
laugh at it because I
Still a good
know the
movie.
people who in the first 2 who were based on 2 of the characters, I know them, and I see them
Yeah.
when I see those characters, and I roll out of my bed laughing.
Yeah.
And it's weird because that's how I found out my husband's gift. My husband's a dream walker.
Oh.
Didn't know that till I made him watch Insidious with me, and he's like, "Hey, do you ever do that?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, well, I do." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Well, what do you do when you're doing this?" And he said, "Well, sometimes I stand over you and watch you sleeping." And so I could have kicked him in the butt because I always feel like there's someone over me and it
Yeah.
wakes me up in the middle of the night. And now I hit him. But, even with my kids, I raised them to not fear the
Yeah.
paranormal. Like, they were going to school telling people about the fae, and I was always getting in trouble with the school because they're like, "Your kids can't come here talking about ghosts. They're scaring all the other kids." And I'm like, "But why?
Yeah.
They kids shouldn't be afraid of this. I have fear." And, I thank Father Bob because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't know about my own gifts
Yeah.
because he's literally the one that came up to me in the battlefield in Gettysburg when someone was being spiritually attacked by something and said, "Is it residual or is it intelligent?" And I looked at him and I said, "I don't know. You're the priest." And he said, "But you're the empath." And I looked at him and I said, "What are you talking about?" And, I'll never forget that because it opened up this whole world for me
Yeah.
that up until that point, I always just thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And
No.
I almost got excommunicated because of my paranormal work. And,
Yeah.
I'm thankful to the people I had in my life that stood in for me and said, "No, wait, this
Yeah.
is, part of what we do in the church. It's just nobody ever wants to talk about it."
Yeah, like in the church, there's mystics and seers, like
Mhm.
mystics that talk to God. Like it happens, and I think what happens too is a lot of people take a lot of the Bible literal. Like I was
Yes.
just talking about Father Bob yesterday about this because we get together every Wednesday, and too many people take it literal. They speak of spirits in the Bible. They talk about ghosts in the Bible. Yeah, it tells you not to do certain things. Yeah, and there's really a meaning. Like you talk about the Ouija board. Like I'm one of the people that say, a new thought theory of laws of attraction, laws of intent.
Right.
If you use it for the wrong reason, and of course, I'm an oxymoron here, but
Right.
sometimes when you open up a line of communication to the unknown, you don't know what's going to come through. But you have
Right.
to be ready. You have to have the faith. But in
And
the
you have to
same,
protect yourself no matter what you're doing,
yeah, in
whether
the
it's
same,
an EVP, the Ouija board, a
yeah,
pendulum board, or REM pods.
yeah,
It's still spirit communication.
and that's why people don't understand when I take breaks. Like I truly think a lot of what my breaks are of my own mistakes. I am a person. I have sinful nature, and I've done some stupid things. But
But you
I
can
also
admit it.
But I also think it's, in some form, I'm not blaming the devil, but I think it's also a form where it's temptation as well. It is meaning to pull me out of something that I do good. I have helped people, and I don't make it sound self-centered. I have been that mediator that, through God to work through for people to be helped and feel comfortable living in their own space or their own bodies again. So, I feel like sometimes, even though my poor decisions, I think that it is, of course, loved by the devil and loved by malevolent forces because, as some people would say, we are light bringers, right? We
Mhm.
bring, we, or the torch bearers is a better
Right.
analogy for it. But yeah, I think that you have to understand that, and it goes back to that you were chosen, but also what Ed Warren once said too is you're marked once you deal with it, and
Yes.
regardless of how far you think you can get away from it,
It's gonna
um,
come back.
it, it gonna come back. Like I've walked away multiple times, and I needed that peace and resolution of myself, and that's when I find myself better. Like I'm a person that does a lot of introspection, and I joke that I always come back much stronger, but it's the truth. But I think it's also that realization that it's never going to stay away for a long time. There's been many times where I get an email from a person with children, and I cannot not respond to them.
Right,
I can't say, yeah, I can't help you, I'm not doing this anymore, here's this person, because you're so close to you have to, at that point, that's a trial and tribulation, right? That's your initiative, and that always pulls you back in. And you know it's a difficult thing, because it's like, now the enemy knows you, and you always have to be on your guard. And that's why I say, back to the point what I was trying to make, is that when you're doing spirit communication, EVPs, or even observing, is that if you're not in a good place, you shouldn't be there. Like,
right,
that's why when I'm not in a good place, I pull out. And people don't understand it sometimes, but it's like, I deal with, and I deal
right.
with dark stuff, and
Yep.
you don't want to be on half good, or even a quarter good, and go into that, because then your life can be consumed and be ruined. So I have to take a break, I have to step back, because if you open that line of communication, or you're making statements, and you're poking an invisible bear, then you can get bit, and your family can get affected, and
Oh, yeah.
friends can get affected. So it's like, you have to be privy to understand that you have to be mentally good. You have to have a good head on your shoulders. You have to have your faith employed, regardless if it's Christian, Islamic, Judaism,
Yep.
native folklore, whatever. If you are of that route, you need to have, one, a good faith, and it could even
Mhm.
be faith. It could be even faith in a non-higher power sense. Faith in general is a mediator for good health in your life, right? So if you don't
Yep.
have faith, you're not going to accomplish goals. And then that could be in a secular sense. You have to have faith in yourself to accomplish a goal, or you never accomplish a goal. So regardless, faith is a much required need in your daily life. And so isn't a good mental health. And
Right.
also, what's important, we always talk about intelligence, but one thing that psychology teaches you, but if you're very well versed in social science, emotional intelligence is key too.
Exactly, because,
So
I know for myself, I stepped away in 2020, left my team, left everything because I needed to stand up for something that I thought was right.
yeah,
And for myself, for the first time in my paranormal career, I stood up for me.
yeah,
And I just came back, the last year,
yeah,
2024 into 2025. I've started stretching out again, but I had to take that time because I was losing myself
yep,
into someone else, and I was becoming a person that I didn't like.
yeah,
And I felt like I was stagnating and being held back from what my mission was. Because I remember, man, I had to be about 10, maybe 12 when the Smurl haunting happened in Pittston. I lived in that area. I can still picture that day on my local news with Ed and Lorraine standing on that porch talking about the preternatural and the supernatural and looking at my mom and dad and saying, "That's what I'm going to do with my life."
yeah,
And they said, "You're crazy. People don't really do that. That's not a real career." My mom had to bite back on those words when I got heavily involved into it. And now I find her calling me, asking me for advice. "Well, this happened. Do you think this could be a sign?" Or, and I find it funny because back then they thought that it was a joke and
yeah,
that, but yet even when I first started getting heavily involved in the field, I had a lot of pushback. And I still do from a lot of my family. I have two separate Facebook pages, one for my family that are prude and one for all of my paranormal people. And some of them cross over on both. But for the most part, I got tired of people calling me up and saying, "I'm praying for you. I'm that." And I'm like, "You don't need to pray for me. I'm a minister. I pray for myself daily, and I don't only pray for myself. I light a bowl of smudge and I incense." And I said, "Trust me, I'm well protected." I have medals buried at all four corners of my property, you know. And then
Yeah.
if that doesn't work, I have war water that was given to me from someone in New Orleans that I put around the base of I said my house is guarded and protected
Yeah.
because I know what happens. You
Mhm.
know, I tell people all the time, even though the bad, evil, demonic hauntings are some of the rarest, when they happen, they're pretty bad.
They are.
I've seen things that I will never forget.
Yeah.
And, you know, I seen a man that sat right next to us, like you and I are talking right now, totally go blank,
Mhm.
smile come
Yep.
over his face that was the eeriest. I
Yep.
was literally praying. I have a Benedictine crucifix. It's like literally right here on my desk. It never goes far from me. And it was blessed with oil touched to the glove of Padre Pio. Yeah. Yeah. Mine's the same way. It has like medals that people have given me over the
Yeah.
years. And, yeah, here's mine right here.
Yeah. He is
There's
even
mine.
he is even actually a real relic.
Yeah.
So I have relics too. Yeah, from Father
Yeah.
Bob and other things.
And, this doesn't go far from me, like, and it's odd because when I'm going and it has, a couple of saints that, I am very close to Saint Barbara, which is my confirmation saint, and Saint Catherine of Siena, because one time someone told me I was like Catherine of Siena, that if the
Hmm.
Pope was getting me angry, I would probably travel to wherever the Pope was and tell him he needed to get back to Rome.
Yeah.
And so she became kind of like a patron to me, and Bridget, of course. And you know, like I always know when I'm going somewhere where there's going to be issues because
Yeah.
this will disappear.
Yep.
Like I can't find it.
Yep.
And it's gotten so bad that I have multiple ones. But this one in particular, because it was touched to the glove of Padre Pio,
Ah.
means so much to me.
Yeah.
And it is kind of like a relic, I guess you could say.
At that point, it really kind of is. Yeah.
Yeah. And but going back to what I was saying, like I know something big is happening when this goes missing because
Yeah.
this just doesn't go missing. But it does go missing. But this guy, like I had this and I was
Yeah.
holding this under the table and I was rubbing the Benedictine medal and I was praying, praying, praying. He just looked at he says, and I know what you're trying to do, white witch, and it's not going to work. And like me and the other people at the table were like shocked because like, first of all, like, what do you mean you know what I'm doing? And why would you call me a white witch? And then, to turn around that when we were leaving, like we tried to pray with him and we watched as his skin was starting to get scratched right in
Yeah.
front of our eyes. And so, like, I don't understand. And I don't know if you've seen an upsurge in this or if it's just like the area in which I live, but we have paranormal teams that call themselves dark teams. We only deal with and I'm like wondering like if these guys ever really saw that, I don't think they'd come out of it okay
Probably not.
because they're doing it for like, like John Zaffis said today, they're doing it for clicks and hits
Yeah.
and they're not doing it because it's a calling.
Yeah.
And and I didn't realize how much we had in common until we started chatting tonight because we do have a lot of the same philosophies and
Yeah.
beliefs. And and I think that's something that's not happening in the community anymore. We're not talking. I mean, I'd seen that you had shared about that stuff today. Like, we need to come together and
Yeah.
stop trying to compete over who can get the most likes and follows. And,
Yeah.
me, all I want to do is teach.
Yeah.
I want to teach people and I want to help people. I don't care if I ever make money off of this. If
Yeah.
I sell one book and
Yeah.
that helps one person, that's all I care about. I don't write to
Yeah.
make money. I write to help people. I've given more of my books away to people
Yeah.
than I've actually sold because if I feel someone needs to, like, especially
Yeah.
the one that I wrote about special needs kids,
Yeah.
because so many of them have this connection
Yep.
to the other side of the veil. And like my son was the subject of a book called Autism and the God Connection. And it was written by a person with Asperger's syndrome, like him, that shared stories of kids that have this otherworldly connection to a higher power.
Yeah.
And And when you were talking about, like, whatever your understanding is, I didn't realize the difference in higher powers until I got into NA.
Yeah.
And I went to an NA meeting and said, and my higher power is science, or my higher power is nature. And it just made me like, these people were succeeding, and their idea of a higher power was so different than mine. And I think that's what led me down the interfaith, and
Yeah.
the understanding of wanting to learn it all. Because
Yeah.
if these people are living such productive lives, I want a piece of that. Because some
Yeah.
days I still don't.
And the crazy thing is too, I think you said something earlier about like jumping from church to church when you heard something bad, and
Yep.
you know what the thing is too is like what's funny about every religion, every belief system, they have more similarities than the differences. And that's what's funny is people read between the lines, right? You talk about we have a big, for a long time we had a big like anti-Muslim
Mhm.
ethos in the United States or throughout even Western civilization. But you talk about you were a Muslim. Jesus, Isa, is the savior in the Quran. He's the
Right.
one that comes back at the end, even though he might not be the Messiah or the Son of God. He is the one that's supposed to come back at the end of time. Still, so but
Right.
in it,
Exactly.
but
Ishmael.
yeah,
Ishmael is where the
yeah,
Muslim nation came from. When
yeah,
he was cast in with Hagar into the wilderness, and God
yeah,
said, I will make Moses' wife
yeah,
was a Muslim.
yeah,
When she says to him, I'm a daughter, I'm a believer in the God of Ishmael.
yeah,
But people don't want to look at that. And it's a
yeah,
struggle for me, because when I do my work, and I do separate my work in the paranormal, because I am an analytical thinker.
yeah.
I never thought I was. I always thought I was like a believer, but I'm a runner in
Mm-hmm.
the same sense, because I can tell you
Yeah,
when I feel off, and we have tons of recordings to prove it.
yeah,
I run. For years I couldn't, because I was in a wheelchair. But since I've been able to use my legs and everything again, like, I mean, I don't know how many times we were in Mansfield Reformatory, and you could hear the recording saying, will you please stop running? Will you please stop running away? But if I feel that like fight or flight kick in,
yeah,
I know I have to go,
yeah.
because you're going to get hit with something. And
Yeah, that's actually a perfect analogy talking about like dark cases, right? Like,
mhm,
anytime that I've actually been in the presence of a true demonic force, and like you said, rare, but do occur. There is that physiological reaction of fight or flight that happens, right? And your body and your mind is telling you get the hell out of there,
yep,
but because we are there for a mission, and we know if we listen to our body, that's what they want. You have to fight through that mentally, of course with your faith as well empowering you. But every time I've dealt with the demonic is that physiological reaction occurs, even in negative hauntings as well, but it's a lot more murkier, right? It's like a good example I'd like to say is like I'm outside, it's light and beautiful out. I walk in and I feel like I'm going through mud when I hit that threshold, right?
I
It's like
get the
walking.
heaviness here.
Yeah, it's like walking through mud. You get that hit in the solar plex, right? It feels like you're getting punched over and over again. Then you kind of know that. I feel like I even tell people, like in my true opinion, is that even if you weren't a believer and you were skeptical, but you were in the presence of a true demonic, regardless if you weren't a clair ability or a medium or never claimed to be, I think everybody has abilities,
I agree.
but I still think even if you shut it off because you were such a stern skeptic, if you were in the presence of a demonic, you would feel it. I've tested this theory with people in the sense of even negative hauntings, right? Once again, I've had people where I really needed help. I don't go by myself; it's dangerous. For one, it's a liability, but also you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
But I've taken people that weren't really necessarily trained or with dark cases, and they weren't demonic cases, but they were dark cases, and they walked away much differently. Either it scared them away from the paranormal forever, or for a period of time where they would say, I would never want to do that again. Like I had a New York case where I worked with um Sabrina Pasquarelli. I don't know if you know who Sabrina is,
Mm-mm.
but she used to be with Sanctuary Paranormal, Dave Giuliano's group.
Oh,
But
okay. I know
um,
Dave.
But yeah, Sabrina had a case in New York, and I was a member of Sanctuary as a consultant, and I brought a couple friends that were up in the area that are pretty seasoned investigators, and I brought them, and it changed their life, and it dealt a negative ramification to them afterwards. Like they had a rocky life for years after that case, and that wasn't even a demonic case. That was just a
Right.
very negative case, which it could be on the underpinnings of maybe something of a lesser evil, but
Right.
you have to be very cautious. Like, and you were saying about the stone face. There's nothing more chilling when the demoniac is they look right at you, and it's not like they're looking right through you,
Through
and
you. Yeah.
and you feel that. Like you feel that, like your whole body
Mhm.
shivers, and you quiver, and it's like it is an absurd feeling. And I wish that on I don't wish that on my worst
I tell people
enemy.
all the time, it's
Yeah.
something if you're truly in the presence of something like that, you are never going to forget it.
No.
I have not.
Yeah.
I've only, I believe, had that experience maybe 3, maybe 4 times. Like,
Yeah.
I know I went, we did a case and I did a home exorcism. Like, not a person, just an exorcism of the
Yeah.
home, a
Minor
blessing of
right.
the home. Right.
Yeah.
And, everybody to this day still swears, like, a week or so later, I had a STEMI heart attack and almost died.
Yeah.
And, every time I've been involved in one of these heavier
Yeah.
cases, it has affected my health. And, like,
Yeah.
I told people, like, yeah, like, we don't live long lives. You know,
We don't.
we don't. Like, I mean, you look at the history of people, but, there are, like, you look at Father Bob, and, that's my goal to
Yeah.
to make it to that old age.
64,
Yeah.
65 years old. Yeah.
Right, like, I wanna make it to 80 like my mom, and, and that's why I went on this whole health journey, but at the same time, I know what my calling is,
Yeah.
and if my calling ends up costing me a shorter lifespan, but I'm helping someone else
Yeah.
become saved from that torment in the long
Yeah.
run, I did the job that I was put here for.
Yeah, well, even if Father Bob's not an exorcist, but he should be. He doesn't want to be ever though. But
Right.
but if you listen to like a Ripperger or a Martins or even a Morth, or even the countless other
Yes,
exorcists
I
that are very
remember
public
I've read all
nowadays,
of those books.
but they'll tell you even that every time they do an exorcism or deal with a client, a piece of their life is taken from
Yep,
them. They say that emphatically, and it's true. Every time that you deal with the demonic or even negative cases,
negative stuff.
you think about it, right? The more that we know now about physical health, like
Mhm.
the mental health actually empowers the physical health. So if you have a bad mental health, your physical health is going to be demoralized. But that tells you something, right? When you go into those cases that are negative, you're dealing with stress, anxiety, depression. You're dealing with transference, which is
Yep.
people's emotions coming onto you. That's all being partaken into you as well, and that is eaten at you as well, not just what is there that is oppressive and strong, and you're putting a lot of willpower and faith to invoke God and the saints and the angels to come in, which is also like takes physical consumption from you and mental consumption. So you're doing all this stuff and you're dealing with all that. It takes a toll on you, and like I said, like, and you actually said something about the nettles, but yeah, every true demonic case, something weird happens in your life, like either synchronicities or like things going missing
Yep.
or something's happening. Like the one of the most prolific moments I had, and I've started talking about it more over the past couple years because it's been easier to digest, and I realized that it really truly was what it was. But I talk about a case that I did in Western Massachusetts, a family of five, 3 kids, and a husband and a wife. And I had got a email from them, and after the email, once they have, I hear about kids, I fast pace it,
Right.
regardless
Yeah.
of all the hurdles I make everybody else goes through. But because kids were involved, I fast paced regardless. I'll get all the information I need while I'm there. I got to make sure that kids aren't being subjective and treated by the parents unjustly, right? They're telling them it's something, but it's really just like
Right.
abuse going on or something. But so I had got the email. I called them and I said I will be there next Saturday, right? And it was a Saturday. I called them, or Friday or something like that, and so I had set the date. And that night I went to sleep. Mind you, I had like some pictures of scratches and stuff they sent me that was happening, but I hadn't seen their faces. I hadn't seen like their full body characteristics. I haven't seen really pictures of their house or what it looked like outside. But I had a prolific nightmare that night of driving to the house with my team, and observing the surroundings, observing the house, and and what they were wearing and what they looked like. And what woke me up from that nightmare was that I actually had end up killing the family in my nightmare. Right, I killed them all. I butchered them, like
Wow.
talking about like horror movies and being scared
Right.
of them. It was like watching Hostel or Saw. That's how brutal. And they were children, young children. So imagine waking up in like anguish and be like, "What the heck was that?" But you know what the scariest thing of that is? It wasn't even just a nightmare, is that when I arrived that Saturday, and I thought to myself throughout the whole week, should I go? Like this is a little absurd. Like, is
Right.
this? Am I going to get taken over? And you start to question yourself, even though you're strong within your faith. You start to question yourself. But I went anyway because I like to say I'm a moron. Um, but so I pulled up with the same team members that were in the dream. Um, the family comes out to greet us. Not only is the surroundings same, the trees in the same location, the family was wearing the same damn clothes that they were wearing in the nightmare. They had the same
Wow.
hairstyle. The furniture was in the same spot, same colored rooms. It was absurd. Like, it took me back for a second. Like, I lost my breath, like, of not only because there was a true infestation there, which of course was murky, but it also took my breath because it was like, really, like, like I had to think for a second. It's like, this is really going to be when I go to jail. And I had to recollect my thoughts, and I was like, this is going to happen. God's on my side. I love Jesus. I have to help this family. And, I was fortunately able to help them. And they called me back one more time. I didn't have to go there, but I just gave them guidance over the phone and said, do this, do that. If you didn't do the metals at the four corners of the house like I asked you to do, or put metals at your mantle and stuff like that, if you haven't done that, do that. Never heard back from him after that. So, but that to me was the most one of the most prolific moments of being involved in this
It's like
field.
I think it gets to it knows we're coming before
Yeah,
we know we're coming.
yeah,
That was the way, I was taught,
yep,
when I was learning. Like, they know
of course,
we're coming before we
yeah,
do.
yeah,
And that's something that, because I do a lot of cases now. The area that we live in is a very high drug area.
okay,
So a lot of the home cases I do isn't
yeah,
always like, and I try to tell people this, like, hauntings aren't just spiritual.
yeah,
I did a case here in town. It was a family with kids, so we, of course, went right away. And it wasn't even an entity that had taken over. It was all of the energy, because the previous owners were
yeah,
so heavy into addiction, and
yep,
it was the room in the attic where
yep,
that person would go and shoot up heroin and
yep,
smoke his meth, and that energy was just so thick. And me
yep,
myself, having been an addict, the minute
yep,
I walked into that room, it was like I was using all over again. And
yeah,
now I've been clean since I'm 20 years old.
yeah,
So it's like, I have like over 30 years on, and I'm just like, whoa, wait a minute. But that's what it felt like to me. Like, I had something
yeah,
take me over, like I was using drugs again.
yeah,
And it's scary because, like, I tell people all the time, you don't ask for this at all. None
yeah,
of us asked to, like, when I got into the paranormal, did I ever think that this is what I'd be doing? Absolutely not. I
yeah,
thought I'd just be going, playing with Casper somewhere, or being like the Ghostbusters, things like that. I never thought I would, like, ever have to experience the darker side. Unfortunately,
yeah,
should have known, because I did get involved with a team that kind of did have that focus.
yep,
And but I always thought, "Well, I'm just gonna learn." I'm a researcher. That's what
Oh
I'm
yeah,
gonna do is research. But you're still in the midst of it, whether you're
yeah,
researching it, reading about it, or trying to help. And like you are, I'm always for families if there's a children involved. Like I'm a
yeah,
mom, I'm a grandma, I would
yeah,
rather, help those families and get to the bottom of whatever's going on as quickly as possible
yeah. Like,
and make sure the kids are safe.
yeah, like if it's a normal individual, like I truly do like get an instant red flag if somebody emails me and said I have a demon, right? It like
Right. Oh yeah.
most people that are possessed, they're like 9 out of 10 times, if not more, even closer to like 9.8, don't know they're actually possessed. It's usually
Right.
a family member or a friend that reaches out to you, or they
Exactly.
or that person's lost time and they've gone through every other angle they can to figure out what's wrong with them, and then they kind of reach out to you. But like in the same sense, if it's not a family, if it's a person and they say they're possessed, I tell them, and this is where my evolution has happened throughout the years, is I said, well, you got to go get a psychological evaluation before I
Yep.
can even help you. Because if you don't get that evaluation, I don't really truly know if you're bipolar or DID, or schizophrenic. Like I have to understand what I'm getting involved with, because I don't want to give you advice that's going to go against what your psychiatrist says or your
Right.
therapist says. I want to be in unison with what they're saying to you. Like, yeah, you could have schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder or bipolar and still have a spiritual affliction. But if you have
Right.
a spiritual affliction, you have that. You got to work on both.
Both
So
have to. Yep.
I tell people that don't have families that, if it is an individual, is like, you have to go get that. And if they're not willing to go get it, unfortunately, I'm not willing to help them, because I
Yep.
can't help them if they're not willing to help themselves. And so many people think, well, it's because you think they're crazy. Well, it's not. Once again, your consciousness or your soul, which is your spirit, and your mental health and your physical health are all in unison. You all have to
Yep.
work on all three of them at the same time to better yourself. Especially when you're dealing with a demonic infliction. It's just not like, I do a blessing and say prayers over you, or do a
That's not
deliverance,
gonna
or
work if you still have this stuff going on in the
yeah,
brain or in your
yeah,
body. I know, I did a podcast last season. It was called The Psyche of Psychics
yeah,
because I hear so many people saying, "Well, I'm not gonna go get mental health help because I'm a psychic and I don't want my." It's not gonna like we did this whole
yeah,
big thing because just because you go and get if you're on the appropriate medication and you do have a mental health disorder, you're still going to have visions.
yeah, for sure.
It's not going to stop. If it stops, that means you have a true mental health affliction. And
Yeah,
that and that's something
yeah,
that we were, very adamant to try to get across to people because I hear so many people,
yeah,
especially people in the psychic realm, that won't go and get help, either
yeah,
mentally or physically, because they
yeah,
feel it's going to impede on their gifts.
yeah,
And I tell people all the time, I
yeah.
take anti-anxiety medication
Of course, yeah,
because if I don't, people can't live with me. I get into a car and I
yeah,
cry.
yeah,
I can't go down hills. Like, and people like laugh and think, "Oh, what do you mean you can't go down hills?" And then they
yeah.
get into a car with me when I'm driving and come to the mountain, and I sit there and cry for 5 minutes
Oh
trying
gosh,
going down the mountain 5 miles an hour because I was in a car coming down my
yeah,
driveway, and my driveway is a steep hill out into the
yeah.
highway. I lost the brakes on my car.
Oh gosh,
So now every time I go down a hill, I am afraid, it stems back from, I died when I was 20 years old. I was in a car
yeah,
accident and I was clinically dead. And from that moment on, I had these fears in the car. Like Michelle used to always tell me she thought my past life had been so long till I came back around again that now I have like these horrible fears because I don't want to die again. And I'm like, "Well, that makes sense," but, that's the best way she could put it to me, like,
yeah,
in that terminology. It's like, maybe it's just been so long since your soul has come back around, that it's doing
yeah,
everything in its power to keep you safe, but yet you keep putting it in dangerous situations.
yeah.
A and I'm like, "Well, like, I picked a field that can be a little dangerous at times."
Very dangerous.
Or I
And
should say, it chose me.
Yeah, and you're correct too. Like psychics. I one of the things I not only tell clients afterwards, like if they've been receptive and help, I do suggest certain websites or even certain people in specific areas after they deal with a negative haunting or demonic haunting that they should go talk to a therapist because post traumatic stress disorder is a real thing. If
Yes.
it's traumatic, going through that affliction, go speak to somebody. Same thing with me, right? I talk to a therapist once in a blue moon. Now, I don't need them all the time, but after a heavy case, I will go speak to my therapist and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I dealt with this. Like, I need to get it off me." But you know what the thing is too? Even therapists go see therapists.
Yeah,
Psychiatrists go
exactly.
see
But you have to
therapists.
find the person
Yeah,
that
gets you.
when yeah, you
Yeah,
need to find, like,
yeah,
especially in our field.
yeah,
So many people look at it as junk science and pseudoscience, and they don't think what we do is real. But
yeah,
at this but when you find, like, I'm very lucky, my psychologist is an idealist. He's into idealism.
yeah,
And so it was really weird is that the psychologist that worked a lot with my former team and him went to
yeah,
college together. They got their
yeah,
master's degrees together.
yeah.
So when our teen psychologist had done my MMPI, and he came out with the same exact relations that my other and they're like, "You're not crazy."
Yeah.
If you answer these, and they always said that they believed me when I talked about the voices, because they said, "You don't get excited, you don't get upset, you don't freak out. You just say, well, the voices in my head said this."
Yeah.
And they said that 9 times out of 10, that shows them that you're not lying. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people that are over the top, like, "Oh, man, I heard all the," and they said, and you're just like, when I ask you where you heard it, you're like, "Oh, the voices in my head told me." Or, for the longest time, my best friend, like, when I was in a very bad mental state,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it at the time, but I thought it was voices in my head, but it was his voice. And it was him telling me to get up, get showered, take care of my kids,
Yeah.
eat, and it was him, from the other side, keeping me alive, keeping
Yeah.
me doing what I needed to do. And I didn't realize that, though, until I got more heavily involved within the paranormal community. And I brought people that were able to explain to me, one, I had these gifts that I could hear.
Yeah.
And then as I explored that, I started feeling like my friends always say, like, I'm a thermometer in a location, because if someone died there, I'm going to experience their death.
Yeah.
And I have. I've died of dysentery. I've been shanked. I've been stabbed. I've been hung. I, I've experienced all of those deaths physically.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes it scares me, but I still go to those locations. I'm attracted to asylums.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I always tell people, I feel my duty, as a storyteller, because I'm half Lakota and I'm a
Okay.
storyteller by trade. And I tell people my mission, besides helping people, is also telling stories of the
Yeah.
people who were here before us.
Yeah.
And I feel so much lighter when I leave somewhere and can share a story of an entity or a spirit
Yeah.
that is there and wants their story shared.
Which makes sense too with your Native American background. They were huge storytellers with spirit,
Mhm.
but also fascinating with asylums, especially with your history, because for the longest time, until like probably past 20, 30 years,
I would have been
you
in
know,
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
though too, but how those people are treated in asylums because they were thought there were issues or problems. Mental health has evolved in so many different
So much,
ways,
like, so
but
much.
asylums for when they were asylums, they were treated so poorly. So
But
you
I
have that
get both
resonance.
ends. I get
Yeah,
both ends because, like, I go to Penhurst. I know the history of Penhurst. I've
yeah,
watched Suffer the Little Children. I was, totally obsessed with Penhurst most of my life. However, when I went there and I'm sitting there in the Devon building, which is one of the more, places
yeah.
where in the
I've
tunnels
been there.
bad things happen. Yeah. And I'm sitting in that building. I could feel the pain. I could feel the anguish. I could feel the suffering, but then I could feel underneath all that happiness. Like, and then, then after I came back from there and I researched and read stories of the kids who were taken out of there after they closed,
Yep.
saying how much they wanted to go back because no one accepted them outside the walls of that school.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
and that was their home, and
Yeah.
that's where they felt safe. So, I mean, I could see and I see both ends of the spectrum when I go. I don't like prisons
Yeah.
because, I've seen horrific things at West Virginia Penitentiary. I've
Yep.
seen and felt horrific things there.
Yep.
Like, I did go to one prison up in New York, upstate New York, Wayne County. It's a little rinky-dink prison, and it's, like, outside Palmyra, New York, and
It's funny.
that wasn't too bad of an experience,
Yeah.
there, but it was a small little prison. It was like, it was the first place I've ever been where I've actually had things answering us as we were sitting in a safe room having a conversation among each other. When we listened back to our recordings, people there were answering us like
Mm.
they were part of our conversation.
Yeah.
And now we went to the historic Palmyra, and I had the exact opposite. I walked into this room that was supposed to be devoted to religion, and what is it? John Smith, the founder of the Tablets of Mormonism,
Mhm.
yelled at me and told me to get out. I'm like, all right, I don't belong in there, I guess. I wanted to go see because they have a room that's devoted to the Fox sisters and to him because it's where the tablets of Mormonism was founded.
Yeah.
And he didn't want me in there. And I'm like, all right, no problem. I'm out. So yeah, it's weird how I could go to a prison and they were so kind and gentle. And then I go in and I'm getting yelled at by other people to get out.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I my big thing is mental health. And I think that's why I'm attracted to asylums more
Yeah.
because I can tell where ECT we went to St. Albans. I knew right away I started feeling like I was getting my head shocked. And a couple minutes later, the tour guide came in and said, in this area, they did ECT in its infancy. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, no wonder why. I go into another area, I can smell chlorine. And it was where the hydrotherapy was. And the same thing happened to me in Wildwood at the sanitarium there.
Yep.
I'm standing in the first room and I'm like, I smell chlorine. And my friend who had been there previous is laughing, saying, oh, do you? We get down in the basement and there's the hydrotherapy tubs right under where I was standing.
Yep. Yep.
So now, before we close up for the evening, because I know you have time, you probably have to work tomorrow. I have to work tomorrow with the cryptid store. So, but any advice that you could give to people out there that may come across the show and need some advice about hauntings or the paranormal or anything like that?
Yeah, no, if you're interested in getting involved in the paranormal field as an investigator, a researcher, or even what we do, of course, in my opinion, with what we do, find a mentor, find somebody to work with, somebody that's legitimate in the sense, it's not like we have a yellow book of this is, but you can reach out to people and get their advice of people and see how they are as a person, as a intellect, as a mentor, as a demonologist. If you're an investigator researcher, find a local team that's willing to help you out. Go to an event. Those events are a little bit more entertainment based, but you can find equally minded people. But just do your own research. Look at the forefathers. Not don't look at the past 10, 20 years of recency bias of who's popular now. Look at people like Charles Dickens from the Ghost Club and cyclical research in Europe, and do your research. Dig deep, see if it's something you want to get involved in, if it's if it's something that you dealt with as a kid and you want to explain that as an adult. There are people out there nowadays, it's not taboo anymore. Tell your story and people will listen. If you need help, don't think you're crazy. Reach out to the proper people. But if you also reach out to the proper people, make sure that you listen to their advice and you listen to what they ask you to do, because they are trying to help you. And one thing, and most important thing for people that are looking for help, if somebody asks you for money, run away. Run away. Do not
Far,
pay
far
them.
away. Do
Do
never
not pay
pay for
them.
help. I
Do
agree.
not.
I encourage that. I'm like, when I hear people say, "Well, they want to come to my house and investigate, but they want me to," no, no, no. We don't charge for our services.
Yeah.
Legitimate investigators maybe will ask you for dinner.
Yeah.
But James, thank you so much for coming
Thank
on
you.
and starting my season off. I'm so excited to have you. And I'll be right back with you, okay?
All right. Sounds good.
From our friends at Got Knockers, Strange Knocks Magazine. Strange Knocks magazine is your ultimate companion for exploring the enigmatic corners of our world. Delve into the shadows with us as we uncover the mysteries surrounding cryptids like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and examine the tantalizing possibility of extraterrestrial life visiting Earth. Our pages are filled with compelling true crime stories that defy conventional explanation, alongside mind bending conspiracy theories that challenge the status quo. Whether you're a seasoned skeptic or a curious believer, Strange Knocks magazine invites you to expand your horizons and entertain the unexplained. With captivating articles, expert interviews, and reader submissions, each issue promises to spark your imagination and thrill your sense of wonder. Join us in our quest to illuminate the unknown, one strange knock. Make sure and check out our merch store at Bonfire. We are a Bonfire verified creator. Link will be in the description.